On Saturday, Donald J. Trump, while addressing over 50,000 supporters at a Trump rally in rural Pennsylvania, survived an attempt on his life from a would-be assassin's bullet. It grazed the side of his head, hitting his ear. If it were not the direct intervention of God and Trump turning his head at just the right moment, the bullet would have gone straight through his head, and we would be telling a very different story today. After hitting the deck of the stage, he emerges to his feet, surrounded by the Secret Service, blood coming from the side of his head, and we have the most iconic image, I think, since 9/11. His fist raised to the sky, the American flag waving behind him, and he says to his supporters, "Fight, fight, fight." Contrast that with the current occupant of the White House who has to whisper and say, "I don't go to bed every night at 8 o'clock.
Let's get ready to rumble! You can't handle the truth.
Hi, I'm Pastor Marty, and this is the Afternoon Drive. Please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, and once you are, smack the bell, click the word all. That will give you the notification of my rants, my ravings, and of course, my undeniably flawless reasonings. Please like and share this video. That's the way we get the word out that we're here. Welcome to the Afternoon Drive. So Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt on his life, literally. I talked about this on Saturday. I will recap some of what I said on Saturday. It was deafening silence from the Biden administration for hours after what happened. Joe Biden on Saturday was coming out of Catholic Mass. He was asked by a gaggle of reporters, had he heard about what had happened to Donald Trump, and he acknowledged he had been briefed. He was then asked for a comment, and he said, quote, "No comment." He then emerged hours later with members of his staff and team to give a statement. He called Donald on the phone as if he and Trump are now friends. He then addressed the nation last night from the Oval Office. And this is what he had to say.
My fellow Americans, I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. Folks, let's focus on what really matters. We're running against the biggest liar and the biggest threat, the biggest liar and biggest threat to our democracy in American history. That's not hyperbole. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America. We've traveled before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized right up to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Take a look at what happened.
You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Most importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Trump is a threat to this nation.
Pastor Marty, that's not fair. President Biden was holding out an olive branch. He pulled down all of his mean TV commercials, and he wants everything to calm down.
He wants everything to calm down because he knows the election's over. The one thing is Joe Biden basically can stop worrying about the coup of trying to bounce him out of office now from members of his own party. Because at this point, with that iconic image and what happened to Trump and the fact that he survived, it's done. It's done. It's done. Donald Trump will be the next president. And I know the next thing on their list is to figure out how to rig it. It's too big to rig. And at this point, we've got enough questions surrounding what happened on Saturday, the breach of security around the president, the fact that Joe Biden, for months, has been refusing to expand President Trump's security detail, especially when he was on trial in New York. He doesn't need that kind of security, and it makes him look too important. That's what members of the Biden administration were saying. It makes him look too important, too presidential to be showing up everywhere with this big motorcade of security. The fact that the Secret Service were warned by people who were actually standing outside the perimeter of the Trump rally. There's a guy on that roof with a gun. There are multiple eyewitnesses to this. It is blowing up all over the internet. The BBC is on it, not the American media. The BBC is on it. We don't put snipers up on towers and roofs anymore, scanning the other roofs in the area to make sure that Trump is safe. We have helicopters, we have drones. Nothing was being done to patrol rooftops, and we have the image of the Secret Service sniper who saw the sniper on the other roof, and he literally turned away as if he wasn't there. And it allowed the first shots to ring out when finally they took down and took out the the shooter. And I know we're not supposed to speculate, not going to run crazy with conspiracy theories. Well, since we can't actually interview the shooter and find out who he really is and what he was really up to, or who, if anybody, put him up to it, we're left with the narrative. And I know we're being told, even by Al Sharpton and other members of the media, in time we will have all these answers. Really? Because we have the answers about what happened to JFK? We have the answers about what happened to Robert Kennedy? We have the truth on those things? We still get narrative on what happened to Abraham Lincoln. Do we have the hard, fast truth? Will we get to it? Not in our lifetime of what happened to Donald Trump. But one thing we do know, this has galvanized support for Donald Trump. This will rally the nation. It is over for Joe Biden, and it's Joe Biden's rhetoric and the rhetoric of the left that directly led to this. Hey, if we can jump to the conclusion that every time Donald Trump said something mean, that fueled the fire that eventually became J6. This is why he was kicked off of all social media. Despite the fact Trump is on record as saying, march peacefully to the Capitol. No. Incendiary language building up to that. It led to that. What about the incendiary language and behavior of the left? From the time Donald Trump became the president-elect, Barack Obama and the left, they wiretapped Trump Tower. And then for 2.5, almost 3 years of his administration, the entire administration was engulfed in Russian collusion accusations and special counsel and being discredited that he wasn't a real president. He had been installed by the Russians and he was a Russian asset. And there were men like General Flynn and others who had their lives destroyed. Only in the end to find out, nope, didn't happen. They tried to impeach him over a phone call to the Ukrainian president, denying him support if he didn't do certain things. You mean like Joe Biden? That we have on video when he was vice president, going to Ukraine saying, if you do not fire the prosecutor who's investigating my son and his company, you're not getting the support from the United States. You won't get the aid. And Shazam, Batman, they fired that prosecutor. The entire sham of making everyone that was on January 6th some type of homegrown terrorist out to overthrow the democracy. All those MAGA gun nuts who showed up at a revolution and forgot their guns. Joe Biden constantly lying about all the people killed that day, like police officers. One person was killed that day, and it was an unarmed Trump supporter, a woman. We don't want to talk about the fact that there were groups mixed in with the people, members of certain alphabet protection agencies filtering in as Trump people there to purposely stir and create and manufacture what was seen on our television screens. So what do? They go after him on all these trumped up court cases. A 30-year-old rape charge, well beyond the statute of limitations, but the state of New York extended the statute of limitations on this one case for this one client, E. Jean Carroll, because it was going after Donald Trump. And she's awarded, what, $86 million. She couldn't remember what year it happened, doesn't remember all the details. And when she was giving interviews on TV, you could tell even Anderson Cooper was creeped out by her. And all Donald Trump said, this woman is a loon. And he was found guilty of defamation. A $400 million judgment against him out of a New York courtroom that his phony real estate dealings, as Joe Biden, when he referred to Donald Trump, as a one-man crime wave. The judge walked into that court proceeding saying that Donald Trump was already guilty. There was nothing he could do to prove his innocence, that he had overvalued his properties and defrauded banks, despite the fact that all the banks did their own independent audits of the value of Donald Trump's property, loaned him the money, everybody got paid back, everybody got money, there was no victim, there was no crime, it's not illegal, every business does this, but Donald Trump was the one that got hit with a $400 million judgment and told that his property at Mar-a-Lago was worth about $18 million. Despite the fact that vacant lots down the street from Mar-a-Lago are going for twice that amount of money. We have the documents. They kicked in the doors of Mar-a-Lago and raided the place. We find out that the FBI staged the photos of things being scattered on the floor in top secret photos, in top secret envelopes. We embroil the president and the nation in Stormy Daniels' hush money. It's not against the law to pay somebody to shut up and go away and leave me alone. And we turned a clerical error into felony accounts or felony counts. The Georgia election. He called the Attorney General of Georgia and said, "Find me those votes." He didn't say manufacture the votes. The same thing George Bush did when he called Jeb Bush, who was governor of Florida, and Al Gore was the declared winner. Find me the votes. For 8+ years, the media, day in and day out, has referred to Donald Trump as Hitler. The Democrats have referred to him as Hitler. They call him every day. Joe Biden calls him an existential threat to democracy. An existential threat to democracy. He is an enemy of the people, an enemy of the country. Biden calls him felon and rapist and career criminal. And yet, all of these so-called criminal cases against him are on things they have to manufacture and dream up and make and create. What's his real crime? He didn't go along with the military-industrial complex and their endless wars around the planet. In other words, he interrupted the gravy train, the money, and that's why they hate him. He's not part of the establishment. They've tried to discredit him. They've tried to put him on trial. Everything they've done, and I told you, was going to backfire. And it has. And now they've tried to kill him. And they missed. And I don't know if the Secret Service was in on it, but certainly somebody there. A guy doesn't get inside and up on a building carrying a gun, and he had a ladder, if somebody doesn't purposely look the other way. But Donald Trump is the one that needs to tone it down. Let me remind you of this.
Here's Martha Retta. Thank you for sending me this. Here's what they're saying led to the shooting.
Also, George, we have to point out, no matter who the shooter, what the shooter's motives were, no matter who the shooter is, you are going to hear conspiracy theories going forward.
No question about that. But as you point out, those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now if I...
So the problem isn't that they're doing lawfare. The problem is that Trump's commenting on it. The problem isn't that they're weaponizing the justice system to imprison their political opponents who's probably going to be the president. So which is kind of like doing a coup. That's not the problem to Martha Raddatz and George Snuffleupagus. The problem is that Trump is commenting on it.
Well, and even if you accept their logic, wouldn't that lead to an assassination
of Biden
on Biden?
Yes.
Right. Why would that cause an assassination attempt on him? This is what I'm saying. They are desperately going to spin this because it's so obvious that if you're going to talk about how the atmosphere might have contributed to it, it's in them calling Trump an existential threat to the country that's going to take away democracy and institute a Nazi state. What do you do with Hitler? Right? It's the old question. What if you had the opportunity to kill Hitler as a baby, right? Well, you're saying he's going to be Hitler. So what does that suggest it's acceptable to do at that point when you make that formulation?
So let me play the rest of this.
Don't get elected. It's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath.
So she's intentionally misquoting Donald Trump in order to create a false narrative that Donald Trump is using violent rhetoric that contributed to this. So that's been debunked a million times already. I thought that they're still doing that, which is why when I go to dinner with my former roommate, he repeats shit like that back to me.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't stop them from doing it. They do it over and over again. The bloodbath line, the dictator on day one. I mean, these are just the most obvious distortions, but it doesn't stop them.
If Donald Trump's words can be, quote unquote, incendiary, what about theirs? Every day the media lies and says, Donald Trump will take CNN off the air. Donald Trump will take MSNBC off the air. He'll kick The View off the air. And some crazo listening to all this, that every day the guy is Hitler and a threat to democracy, didn't decide to take matters into their own hands. That didn't stir any of that. Nancy Pelosi saying, I understand why people aren't in the streets acting violently. Chris Cuomo, who says that protests have to be respectful and neat and polite. And after all of his incendiary language, after Donald Trump is shot at, then Joe Biden comes out and says, we need to calm down. It's over. It's over.